The following is an OHEI podcast production. This episode may contain coarse language and content sensitive to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to our Downtown Eastside Talks. I'd first like to do a land acknowledgement that we're on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're doing a show called our Downtown Eastside Talks without Downtown Eastside residents. This is a conscious decision for the safety and respect of the community. There are a lot of dangers in coming on camera, and we're not willing to do that just for content. And today we have Sean Oran. How are you, Sean?
I'm well, yeah. Busy, but holding up, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, are you a little tired from the campaign trail?
I am, yeah, and I'm continuing to work my day job, which is actually a night job, a late night job. So that definitely has an impact.
You're burning the candle at both ends then.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
But it's been fruitful, no?
It's been really great. The momentum we have, the team that we have working on the campaign is just awesome. And just the responses that we're hearing at the doors is just fantastic. People want to change. People, can see what the mayor and his council are up to. It's pretty naked, and I think Vancouverites are pretty tuned in politically, not only locally but also around the world. And this political moment that we're in is something that is really sort of igniting people and getting people fired up, and it's great to see.
That's beautiful. What are some of the things that ABC has been up to? Like top three ridiculous.
I was gonna say,
yeah, like you got all day.
Yeah. I thought this is only 45 minutes. No,
Yeah.
I mean the top one has got to be firing or pausing the work of the integrity commissioner while under investigation.
Tell me more about that.
Well, essentially we have somebody in a position that's nonpartisan that investigates complaints put forward by, I think, other members of council, but around the code of conduct. If something doesn't seem right, like the mayor's turning a meeting room into a gym, that might be a complaint.
Right.
Things like that. And
Wow.
or I think in this case the complaint was that the mayor was essentially what's called whipping his candidates in a caucus, and that's not really allowed. So whipping just means like, hey, you have to vote this way.
Okay.
That happens in provincial and federal politics, but because municipal politics are different because it's a public forum, essentially, that's not usually allowed. The votes are supposed to take place in front of the public, not behind closed doors.
Right.
So that's one example. I think also getting rid of the Parks Board was another thing that nobody asked for this. Vancouver has the only elected Parks Board in North America, and it's something that we treasure. It's an institution that started with the founding of Stanley Park, and there's a lot of good that the Parks Board does. There's a lot of things that might maybe need some work, but I think just unilaterally kind of scrapping it was egregious.
Yeah, we have a lot of green space. Like when you go to other cities or you live in other cities, you realize that not everywhere has a park every 3 blocks. So yeah, that's too bad to see.
And then, of course, the numerous things around the Downtown Eastside, his brutal and vicious street sweeps that happened. That I was happened to be down there for, and was getting pushed around the police, and just seeing how traumatizing that was for people, and how that is just going to be passed on down the line in this kind of endless cycle. That happens to unhoused and underhoused people in the area. Him pausing the supportive housing, which I know you spoke to council about, as did I. The motion called Uplifting the Downtown Eastside, which is technically Rebecca Bly's motion, but There's some insidious things in that motion which involve opening up the downtown east side to developers essentially. And the leaked memo about talking about essentially removing urban Indigenous folks, putting them back on their home reserves. As we know, this is deeply problematic because not every urban Indigenous person knows where they're from because they were scooped up, in the '60s scoop, or want to go back, or should, urban Indigenous have a right to the city, and so I would say those are a couple just off the top of my head.
Just a few things.
Yeah, I've got actually got a running document that I have that I've been keeping track of, and it's I think now like 4 pages long. So it's
dear.
there's no end to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
When it comes to let's talk about the leaked plan. I already asked you this question in a town hall when I said Ken Sims had his Downtown Eastside plan leaked. What would your Downtown Eastside plan look like?
Yeah, no, and it's a fantastic question, and I think the answer is twofold, and for me the first answer is housing. I think that was my answer for you. Housing first. Housing first works. It's worked in Finland. It's worked in places like Red Deer.
I'm glad you bring up Scandinavia because sometimes I wonder why Canadians don't just call Denmark and ask them how they do things.
No, exactly. I mean, because they have a strong tradition of social justice and strong social movements and governments, that they do things and it just works. They have the machinery. Here, for some reason, we have this kind of pressure that because we're so focused on the individual, we have this kind of underlying mentality that everything is up to personal responsibility. If you use drugs, that's your own fault. If you're homeless, somehow that's like a choice.
Yeah.
That really pervades a lot of our thinking, and it comes down to a root of it is because we fought socialism so hard, in the Cold War. That's so ingrained in us to kind of fight back against any kind of large scale government intervention.
We are also like technically social democrats, like Scandinavian countries. So it's interesting how we can't make that next step to like being like, Denmark has the happiest people in the world.
Exactly. And Finland too, I think.
I'm not like on a campaign for Denmark. Denmark is not paying me to say this.
Yeah, because they realize, and you pointed out something that was really poignant in that we have socialized medicine, but then we have essentially the American version of healthcare, but for our housing system. It's
that's
like
an interesting way of putting it.
We don't really have like socialized housing in that sense, and it's very much an ad hoc kind of thing down here where SROs aren't ideal, but that was Portland Hotel Society in 1993 that kind of sprung up to fill the holes, right?
Yeah.
It's a bandage solution, but it's something. And there's all these nonprofits and they're all great, but it's such a patchwork kind of thing where and then for someone like Ken Sim or Ralph Kaisers, who is a candidate in this election, to blame those people for the cause, which makes no sense, right?
Yeah.
They're missing the causality element of that. These are people that are coming just to try and reduce harm associated with our lack of infrastructure, and especially housing. And secondly, and this relates all into that is I would ask those groups that are invested in the Downtown East Side. They have the answers. They're the ones on the front line doing the work. I would talk to those groups, Vandu, Dolph, Dudes Club, Aboriginal Front Door. Like I would get those people in a room and let's hash out a real plan. So
yeah, that's my wish as well.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the most challenging part of trying to affect like positive change in the Downtown East Side?
I mean, in the short term, it would definitely be that I would be a minority on council. That would be definitely a huge challenge. So it would be a question of whether how combative I would have to be, or kind of conciliatory I would have to be. It would be like a trade-off between these two things, because in the end, I think as we saw, Rebecca Bly, Lisa Dominato voted against to pause the supportive housing. So there is room there. So that would be the biggest challenge, is like, do I go in guns blazing and be, or do I, try and walk a fine line, and maybe we can reverse that pause, because I think there could be another vote that could tip the balance. And we saw the same thing with, it's not related, but the gas, the fracked gas in new builds, that was overturned because Ken Sim wanted to.
What was that about?
So there was a pause in the previous council on new builds having putting gas lines in new builds, because it's a high carbon emission on a city level. It's quite high for us, and so the previous council paused it. Ken Sim wanted to unpause it, and he did. And then there was a motion, because you're allowed to revisit a motion 12 months later, and it was brought forward again. I think it was Pete Fry. Brought it forward again. That was where he had the children's art on the desk, and they said you have to take down the children's art because it's threatening.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So 200 police not threatening.
Not threatening.
Children's art threatening.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm just making sure that I'm on the same page.
Yeah. So, but in that vote was overturned. Peter Meisner actually was the deciding vote in that. So there is room to work in this council. So that's the challenge, is to figure that out, how to best go about that. If we get two progressives on council, it's going to be a little easier. So I think that's definitely the biggest challenge, and just it's going to be a steep learning curve for me. I'm a dishwasher, I'm a journalist, but I don't know a lot about how things work. Thankfully I've got a great team. I've got someone like Gene Swanson who I can lean into and talk about how the actual mechanics of
maybe you can say who Gene Swanson is.
Gene Swanson was
the legend that is
the legend. Yeah. So Gene Swanson was a COPE counselor from 2018 to 2022. But before that, long time Downtown Eastside activist, housing activist, Order of Canada recipient, just her tireless advocacy. She's currently working with the Carnegie housing project. So
yeah. And I just want to say as well, just because if people don't know, Gene Swanson is technically a boomer, right?
Yeah. Not all boomers.
Yeah. Well, she's like the tail end of the last of the hippies instead of a like my mom is.
Yeah.
And she got out there with Dulf when they launched, and she got on the back of a truck or something and handed out safe supply drugs. She's just so cool.
That is, yeah. Oh, that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Somebody do, and it's and her of being of that age,
Yeah, it was really special. For
yeah.
you or me, people are like, oh, you little punks. But
yeah, exactly. It definitely lends a special something to it. I think somebody tried to malign me online, which happens a lot, as, oh, he's just Gene Swanson's grandson. I was like, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to say.
That's an endorsement. That's not so
that's cute. I like that. What are some of the things you're running on?
Oh boy. Obviously fight for housing. There's a lot that the city can do. Build social housing on public land for the public good. The city owns a lot of land. Build on that. End homelessness by introducing a mansion tax, a 1% tax on houses over $5 million, and I think it goes up to 2% if it's over $10 million. I'm looking at you, Chip. Chip Wilson.
Why are they so afraid of that? It's completely affordable. Like,
yeah.
Again, going back to Scandinavia, you'd be taxed like 60%.
Yeah, it's that libertarian strain that kind of exists. I know he's a big Ayn Rand kind of reader, that, that there should be very little government and this kind of thing, which seems absurd when we benefit from government every day. We benefit from, like I said, socialized medicine, but I mean, other things that the government does, libraries. I keep joking that if you were to propose a library today, people would laugh you out of the room. You're like, what do you mean? You just want to let people walk out with free books and hopefully they'll return them? Like, but like that's the kind of thing.
It's kind of a funny concept.
But I mean, that's just the thing. I think we're just so afraid of government because, like I said, it's this fear of socialism that's so ingrained in us. So yeah, that would be two things that I'd fight for, as well as decreasing the police budget, reallocating that budget towards social services. And this is a problem when you get police in politics. The VPU in 2022 made the unprecedented move to endorse a city council and candidates and a mayor. It's never been done before. There's places in Canada, I think Ontario, they're not even allowed to endorse anybody. So this was an unprecedented thing. And at the time, there was an all candidates meeting, and I was a candidate in 2022, and I went and said, police out of politics, held up a banner, and they booted me out. That's okay. I didn't really want to spend much time in that room anyways. bunch of police. Wasn't a very friendly crowd, but this is what we're seeing is that now their budget has gone up $100 million a year. Wow. Additional $5 million announced for something called Project Barrage just the other day, which is, just the naming of it is, suspect. But if you look into the plan, it was to go after like low-level drug dealers. It's like, well, why aren't you doing that already? And will this have any impact on,
Yeah, it's such an aggressive policy. It's called Task Force Barrage.
Yeah, Task Force Barrage. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I was saying to another guest that if they want to spend that money stopping drugs, that they should go down to the ports.
Yeah.
Because a lot of low-level drug dealers are also addicts. So what they're trying to do is medicate themselves by doing something maybe they don't want to do.
Yeah, and that goes to another point where our rates are so low, our social assistance rates are so low that people have to kind of supplement their income some way, be it sex work or drug dealing or petty theft or anything
exactly.
like that. If we get people's needs met, if we if they feel part of a community, then they're not going to have to do that, and they're not have to and so crime goes down. So that's a way to actually attack crime. And we're seeing this, and I keep bringing Finland up. I know Denmark, and Scandinavia. This is going to be the theme, but we saw in Finland, crime went down and drug use went down as well. Yeah. So because you're giving people these supports that are built into the housing, and that.
Well, a lot of people also have to do drugs because they're freezing, or they haven't slept, or they can't sleep. Like if you're a woman on your own in the street, you can't sleep. You can't just pass out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a really, really good point. A friend of mine, Karen Ward, brings this up a lot. Sleep deprivation is the leading cause of psychosis. It's not like there's some chemical imbalance because you're doing drugs. Oftentimes it's sleep. And I know this from firsthand experience. I've being diagnosed with bipolar. I was arrested at Main and Hastings because I hadn't slept in a few days, and because I had bed bugs, and it was a spiral, and then I wasn't sleeping, and I was completely sober, and I was running around the Downtown Eastside thinking that I was Joan of Arc, and that I had to actually
Joan d'Arc. Okay.
Yeah, it was a whole thing, and then an earthquake happened, and I was running around being like, "There's going to be an earthquake," and somebody said there just was, but I think I must have got it backwards. Like I must have heard the earthquake. I don't know. Anyways, it was mania is a scary thing. It's nothing to joke about. But the police had no idea what to do. They were going to take me to the drunk tank.
Right.
I'm like, I'm sober, and they're like, they wouldn't believe me, and so I managed to kind of calm down a bit and be like, you should take me to the hospital, not a drunk tank. So they did. So that was good, and I got the help that I needed. But they were completely unprepared, and they've said that they've written reports saying they don't want to be in the business of dealing with mental illness.
Yeah.
And so let's take that off their plate.
Well, originally ABC ran on 100 cops and 100 nurses. The nurses never happened. Yeah. But I think it's really interesting and brave of you to share like that you have bipolar and that you've experienced police in that state. But I guess you still have a privilege where, you know, like that interaction actually went well for you.
True. Yeah.
Like you were able to like voice that I need to go to hospital and you were brought there.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are in our hospitals are also addicts, are also suffering with addiction, and they're not listened to in the same way. Like if they're not like, I don't think some people are getting taken to the drunk tank, but then a lot of people are getting hospitalized because that's worse for them because they could stay there for an extended period of time. So what do you think about how broken that part of the system is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought up privilege because the reason that I haven't been back down in the Downtown Eastside and being arrested, or I haven't been back in hospital, is because I had stable housing. My parents decided that was a good investment, that I received housing, so I wasn't, like having bed bugs and not knowing if I'm going to get evicted and that kind of thing. So stable housing stabilized my mental illness completely, and I haven't had an episode since. So
wow.
Yeah, in terms of the larger question about healthcare and how to manage that, that might be a little beyond my scope. I know.
I guess those are technically provincial issues anyway.
Sure, but I mean, it's something that we should all be thinking about essentially, and I think part of the answer has to lie in triage, like how we triage people, and also treatment on demand. If you want to get treatment, there's no way that you should have to wait weeks or months without getting treatment. And now their province is talking about forced treatment.
Right.
Let's have treatment on demand first. If you want to get treatment, let's have that first. So I think that would go a long way to even unburdening our healthcare system.
Yeah.
So that you're not just arresting people in the grips of substance use, and we can have people, if they want help, they can get it.
Yeah. I think another thing that happens in our hospitals when people with addiction or homeless are admitted, that they actually have a chance at housing. It's kind of like a strange happenstance that the hospital doesn't want to release people. It's the hospital that doesn't want to release people into the street. So there's instances where people will stay in the hospital for months waiting for housing. Yeah,
and the same goes for jails. I mean, people will often, anecdotally anyways, either recommit crimes or commit crimes just to have that stability and have that housing and, 3 square meals a day kind of thing. And that just means that we need to better fund our social programs and not be cutting them. And unfortunately, we've been cutting our social safety nets since probably the 70s, but definitely in the 90s when we started really cutting back and cutting budgets, cutting the housing budgets. The federal government cut in 1993. I often come back to 1993 as this pivotal year. That was the
Right.
year Woodward's closed.
I was about to ask you, how does Woodward's
Yeah.
compare to what's happening now?
Yeah. So like Woodward's closed. There was a particular strain of deadly drugs that hit the streets. It was actually, ironically, a pure version of heroin called China White. So in contrast to what we have now, where we don't know what's in the drug. So it was like a very pure version. So that kind of was an uptick in overdoses. 1993, as I mentioned, Portland Hotel Society formed. 1993 was also, there was an NDP government, and they began the process of closing Riverview, which they institutionalization.
Wow, that was 93 as well.
Yeah,
Wow.
institutionalization, like say what you will, but they didn't really have a comprehensive plan to have localized like mental health treatment. They were supposed to, and it just kind of didn't happen. They didn't have the money for it, and unfortunately, just kind of set people free onto the streets. 1993 was also, the NDP government, as I mentioned, they had a chance to do things like a progressive property tax. They didn't. And that goes back to what I mentioned about a mansion tax.
Yeah.
Just people whose property is worth more, just pay more, just like income, just like we do with income, right? And we could have done that in 1993. That would have had so much money in our coffers that we could have this social safety net. And so, I like to come back to 1993. Woodward's closed, and we've seen how impactful something like that is to the community. When Army and Navy closed, that was a huge impact.
That's
to the
because you could get a grilled cheese for $1.50 there.
Yeah.
You could get anything so cheap.
Yeah.
Like I personally struggled when that went away.
So we see, and then now I think even London Drugs and Nesters were threatening to leave as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Under this kind of public safety umbrella that people are worried about. The new police station is going into the TD Bank at Woodward's.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, community policing station is going in there.
Community.
Yeah. Well, they're calling it it's funny. They're calling it the Gastown Community Policing Station, but it's not in Gastown.
It's not Gastown.
But that's so kind of typical of our imaginaries, our geographical imaginaries in terms of how we invented Gastown to it not be Skid Row, and how Gastown kind of, depending on who you talk to, has this kind of expansive or restrictive geographical boundary.
Yeah.
Like if it suits someone, they call it, we're this coffee shop in Gastown, but you're not in Gastown. But if there's crime, it's crime in the Downtown Eastside. So it can be these two different places.
Yeah,
at
what
once.
block is this?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting kind of thing where, like I said earlier, the Downtown Eastside just can move around, but you're not. The Downtown Eastside doesn't move around. It's just a stand-in for inequality. It's a stand-in for poverty. It's a stand-in for social programs or social problems that you don't like and don't have any solutions for. So you just say it's the Downtown Eastside.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know, because it's been a while now, that Woodward's used to be a squat.
Yeah.
So how do you think, like, the rest of the Downtown Eastside, is it going to mirror that same model in how that was gentrified?
Well, yeah.
Because that whole block, like on both sides.
That's the way things are going, it looks like. There's a couple other developments that are taking on that kind of large scale thing where they'll have social housing, but it's kind of separate. It's what we call pour doors.
Yeah.
It's funny that
Bob and Michael has that.
Yeah, right. Bob. Okay, there you go. It's funny though that you mentioned the Wood Squad, because that took place right before an election where Cope actually swept power. I was actually at the Wood Squat. I was in recovery at the time, at a place called Central City Lodge, and I would go down there every day and hang out and just listen to the community. And that was really something that kind of radicalized me, because at the same time you had the province newspaper like just demonizing these people and these horrible squatters and drug users. It's just like, these people are great. What do you mean? So that's really like what started my path into radicalization, in terms of, it shouldn't be radical, like radical empathy. Empathy shouldn't be a radical thing, but unfortunately it kind of is. and that's what sort of started me on my own personal journey and about learning about these kind of issues and writing about them for so long. In terms of how the development, it's interesting because what we're seeing in Woodwards is a failure of gentrification. That whole block was all fancy restaurants, and now there's places closing because it's not tenable. You can't just have capital move in. It has to be capital and services.
You have to get rid of all the people first.
Yeah, well, exactly.
You have to send them home.
Yeah. So if Money Mart can't even survive on Hastings Street, that might be a thing that might be a sign that that gentrification isn't.
Yikes! Is not working.
Not working. Yeah.
Now, if you win, what are your first couple of steps going to be?
My first step is to sleep for a few days. Yeah, it's going to be tiring, but no, I think having my office open I don't think I can get like the renter's office back in being on minority. So having an open door, essentially treating my office as a renter's office, I think that's something that that will go a long way, because I'm already getting calls from people being like, I've got this situation where I'm getting rent-evicted and my landlord wants to move back. I'm already getting these calls. So I think that's a sign of things to come, where I can either advocate for them, contact the press, or, act on their behalf, or point them in the right direction, like to groups that can help, or hey, like phone up their MLA and be like, hey, this person's going through this is the thing, and what are the next steps? So that's something that I think I could really do right away, and just be a megaphone for social movements and social groups that are down here.
Right. And if you don't win, what will happen? What do you
also
think?
Sleep.
Also sleep. Maybe sleep a little longer.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll have to get a job, because I only work 2 shifts a week, so I'll have to do something else. I'm not even allowing that to be a possibility. I'm just visualizing winning, so I haven't really even
right answer.
Yeah.
There's no winning at all.
Yeah.
When there was a kind of jokey poll about who would give Ken Sim the most hell. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
But you scored the highest.
What was the final? It was like 80 or
84%.
84. Okay.
I believe. I'm saying or something. I have a bit of a photographic memory, so it was 84%.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think? Are you gonna give him hell or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't want to promise too much, because like I said, if I get in there and it's like, oh, well, things are going well and I'm actually achieving my goals without having to, kind of just be a pain, then that works. But but also if there's going to be things that he's going to want to like push through, like even revisiting the natural gas thing that I talked about earlier,
right?
Things like that, where it's just, I'm going to stand firm and, because I'll have Gene Swanson, breathing down my back and texting me every day. And I'll have you, and I'll have, other people in the community to hold me accountable. So,
absolutely. Well, we believe in you, Sean.
Oh, thank you so much.
We really hope you're one of them.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming today.
Of course.
And thank you for watching and or listening. This has been our Downtown Eastside Talks.